Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Weekly Waypoint. Today we are continuing our civic duty today in San Andreas. Again, starting my shift as a taxi driver, and then you will see what other kind of roles I move to fulfill as the video goes on. Now, I want to say I've played GTA San Andreas before, I'm well familiar with it, I've spent a decent amount of time in it, but again, I was younger, I didn't really care about the story, I didn't really care about playing the game properly in any way, so my experience with San Andreas is mostly just enabling the flying cars cheat and flying around the map. So it really is interesting driving around this city and seeing it properly from the right perspective, because I've played a lot of GTA 5, and GTA 5 of course is set in Los Santos, which is the region of San Andreas we're currently in. And I said in the previous video that, you know, like, speculating about GTA 6, oh, it probably won't be very recognizable because GTA 5's Los Santos isn't very recognizable to San Andreas's version of it, but actually, I disagree now. Having taxied a bunch of people around the city and gotten a feel for it, it is really interesting to see just how many areas you can stop and go, oh, this corresponds to this area in GTA 5. Like, it's not one-to-one. There's definitely a lot of differences, especially when it comes to, like, the highways. There's lots of really exaggerated high roads which don't exist in GTA 5, but, like, there's definitely a lot of areas in this game where you're like, oh, I know where I am in terms of GTA 5. At one point we go past, you know, Michael's house isn't specifically in the game, I don't think, but we go past the area where his house would be, and I'm like, oh, I know where I am, that's crazy. And I wonder if I play more San Andreas, if I'm gonna have the opposite effect in GTA 5 of being like, oh, I know where this is in San Andreas, you know, like areas that I kind of recognize from San Andreas, like Grove Street, for example, here. To this day, I still don't remember if Grove Street is, like, properly represented in GTA 5 in the same manner that it is in this game. So it's been really fun to discover that as I've been playing this today. I'll be honest, unlike the previous 2 weeks, where I had already been playing GTA 3 and already been playing Vice City, that's not the case here. I installed this game for the Weekly Waypoint. I'm falling behind. That being said, I have already hit a difficulty wall in Vice City where it's not that I can't do it, but it would be tedious to keep playing that mission over and over again until I do get past it. It's the mission where you need to rescue Lance Vance, and you need to go in to an area where there's a ton of gang members, and you need to pick him up, and you need to get him in a car, and then you need to drive him to a specific area while you're being chased by gang members in their own cars who are shooting, I think, submachine guns at your car, and they basically make it explode super quickly. And I kind of went, oh, that's not very fun. I'm not going to beat my my head against that, just trying to get it done. So I just kind of put it to the side for a minute. But yeah, I was excited to continue kind of comparing the different GTA games like I've been doing, and loading up San Andreas for that. I don't know if I'm necessarily going to sit down and start playing through the story of San Andreas right now, but it is fun all the same to just, like, have a quick session in, like, free roam or whatever. I've played every game in the GTA trilogy before, but I've never played them back to back to back like this, and so it's fascinating to kind of note how, like, going from GTA 3 to Vice City, the vehicles feel a lot kind of bulkier in a way. I don't really know how to explain it, but they definitely feel different. They definitely feel really, really easy to flip in Vice City. And in San Andreas, they feel different in terms of handling. And it feels like it's a lot harder to, like, flip a taxi, for instance, in San Andreas. The other thing that took me by surprise with San Andreas is just how overwhelmingly large it is compared to the previous 2 games. Like, we're only gonna explore the first kind of island or zone. I don't know if it's islands in this game, I can't remember. I didn't really look at the world map properly, but we're only really exploring the first area in this game, because again I haven't unlocked the others, and it feels bigger than the entirety of the previous 2 world maps. And that's really interesting because as I was playing Vice City, I was kind of struck by how small it was. Like, obviously when you're a kid it feels like a much larger map, but even in comparison to GTA 3 it feels like, you know, maybe a standalone expansion type game, which is obviously why it wasn't called GTA 4. But with San Andreas, this feels like it could have been the next mainline entry in the series. It's ginormous. And of course, in terms of game features as well, you have all of these new things like increasing your driving ability, and there's muscle gain and weight loss and all of these extra things. And Vice City had a few new things as well, like you could have multiple types of different weapons instead of just one of each. But it's really fun to see how these games evolve in ways that you kind of take for granted when you're younger, and you're not looking at it from like a game evolution perspective. And now that I've got my thoughts on San Andreas out of the way, can I go on a bit of a whinge? I promise we'll get back to video game talk in a minute, but oh my god, recording this video has been a bit of a nightmare. So I've been avoiding Windows updates for a little while, for a few months, right? I feel like you already know where I'm going as I'm saying this. And I do that for a reason. Obviously, it's important to keep your computer updated, it's like security updates and stuff like that. I really should have updated it sooner, but I'm always hesitant to do so because every so often there will be a Windows update that just fucks with your PC in ways which are really frustrating, and that's kind of what happened today. First of all, I just want to mention it's really funny. If you continually delay the Windows update for months and months and months, they get more and more frustrated with you. And I have a clip of this on my Blue Sky, but it is a few weeks ago now. But it was getting to the point where it was giving me the overlay of like, oh, update now, or pick a time, or snooze. And when I would hit snooze, it would just come up again like 2 seconds later. So I would just keep spamming snooze and the screen would just keep popping up again and again and again. So the way I got around that was by scheduling it to update at 5 AM when my PC is unplugged anyway and isn't going to be able to do that. But of course, the Windows update comes for us all eventually, and a breaker got tripped in my house, and so my PC hard shut down. And for some reason, whenever that happens, it doesn't do this on boot up if you're just booting it up normally, but if you're booting it up from like a hard shutdown, it does check for a Windows update and automatically install it without your consent, which is really weird, but that's always the way that's worked. And this Windows update, for some reason, wiped my settings in Streamlabs OBS, which is what I use not just to stream when I do that every so often, but to record footage as well. And what's annoying about that is I don't know what my fucking default settings for Streamlabs OBS are. So I was excited to record a weekly waypoint for San Andreas, and not knowing that it had messed with all of my settings yet, I booted it up and I got in San Andreas and I recorded me having a very chaotic taxi driver kind of a day. And then when I went to review my footage, the video quality was abysmal. My microphone had been recorded on the same track as the game audio. Basically, the footage was unusable and I had to record this again. But of course, I wasn't able to just flip a few switches and record it properly. I had to go and do research and figure out all over again, because it's been so long since I set this up. Hey, what are the best recording settings for recording footage with Streamlabs OBS, because recording and streaming are two very different beasts. And the most frustrating part is after an hour of looking things up and tinkering with settings and doing recording tests and making sure everything is working the way I want it to, I've got my settings. I even went back and I looked through my YouTube history and I looked for the last time I looked up a tutorial on this just to make sure that I would kind of set the same settings. And so now my settings are, as far as I can recall, exactly the same as what they were before, but my file sizes are twice as big for no discernible reason. You might be thinking, oh, he must be recording at 60 frames a second instead of 30 frames and not realizing it, because I would think that too, right? It's exactly double the file size. No, I'm still recording at 30 frames a second. I don't know why the file size is double. I've been messing with, making it a little bit lower quality. Maybe I misremembered my settings and I didn't follow the video guide to the exact specifications that were offered, and I'm going to continue to mess with things in future. Maybe I'll be able to tweak it back to what it should be, but the annoying thing about how I record videos is I always have the 30-second DVR delay and I press a button and I record, unless of course I'm recording the weekly waypoint, which is a different story. And so I just tend to amass lots and lots of footage, and if it's going to end up being twice the file size it was before, I'm going to end up filling up my hard drive twice as fast as I was before, and footage and videos are going to take twice as long to render as they were before. And yes, I also saw what happened with those cards. That was really weird. Anyway, that's been my evening. Quite frustrating. and we're not out of the woods yet. Next time I stream, I'm gonna have to set up new streaming settings. Yeah, it's gonna be a whole thing. It's super duper annoying. I wish it would have just... Why does updating your Windows firmware or whatever OS, why does updating that erase your Streamlabs config? Maybe it's still buried somewhere. I don't know. All I know is... Anyway, my clips used to be about 5 times the size they ended up being back when I was recording with Shadowplay, so maybe it's not too much of a problem, but we'll see how things go, I guess. Anyway, sorry, thanks for letting me vent. Back to video games. I actually haven't played that many this week because I've been being social, which is this thing that people do sometimes. I know it's weird. But also, as I've previously mentioned, my gaming time has kind of been going down naturally anyway, as I've been spending more time reading. But I will very quickly mention I did return to a 2-year-old save file of The Witcher 3 because I'm not starting that game for a third time. But yeah, basically I can't get The Witcher 4 out of my head. And I'm like, well, I should probably finish a Witcher game at some point, or at least play a decent chunk of one, instead of just the first 5 hours over and over and over again. I've played the first 5 hours of The Witcher 1, 2, and 3 twice. So yeah, it's still no guarantees that I'm going to end up properly getting into The Witcher 3 like I want to. It's been like 3 days since I last played it. But yeah, I would like to. Picking up an old RPG save is always a difficult task, but I feel like I got to grips with it after an hour or two. For those of you wondering, I'm still on the Bloody Baron questline. I just need to do the Witches of Crookback Bog, I think it is, and I think that ends the questline, and I think that's where I got to on my original save on PC as well. Oh, actually, I do have a little bit more to talk about in terms of video games. I picked up Final Fantasy IV 3D Remake. I've not played it yet, but I found it very... endearing? That's not the right word. I found it very encouraging that Square Enix are still selling the 3D remake versions of Final Fantasy 3 and 4, which, for those of you who don't know, are basically the DS remakes that they did. Basically, there was a sale on, and I looked and I was like, oh, that's right, I own the Final Fantasy 3 3D remake, and in fact, I played like 20 minutes of it many years ago, back before I ever played 14. I've been struggling to enjoy the pixel remaster of Final Fantasy 3 all year, and while I don't think the 3D remake is going to solve any of the problems I have with the game, I don't know, a more involved story with an actual cast of characters might help me get more invested and overcome some of the issues I have with like the amount of times it wants you to swap jobs for certain puzzles. I can't stand that. But as far as Final Fantasy IV goes, it's the one I'm most curious about. It's the one that, at a distance, I feel like I'm going to be most interested in out of the original 6 entries, before they started mixing things up a lot with 7 on onwards. And I don't know, I feel like I've always been a little bit disappointed with how Final Fantasy IV looked as a pixel remaster from the outside, because those pixel remasters all share such a, you know, homogenized art style that it just kind of fails to stand out in a way that Final Fantasy IV did, again, from the outside looking in. And I thought, well, the Final Fantasy IV 3D remake is still available to buy, and it's like super cheap. I might as well get that one, and I might just play that version instead. And then with 5 we'll get back to the pixel remasters, okay? But anyway, in other news, I did a thing, a potentially silly, crazy, stupid, reckless thing, because I've been doing so well this year at getting back into reading, and one of the problems I identified with, like, why I read less books over the last few years was I got super into comics, and I spent a lot of the time I would have spent reading books, reading comics instead. Not an inherently bad thing, but as someone who has a lot of books they would like to read, it was not necessarily the best distribution of my time. However, I just bought a year of Marvel Unlimited. But I was thinking this over. I was like, oh no, I'm gonna stop reading books again if I do this, etc, etc. No, I feel like I've got better at managing my time and, you know, not just, like, absent-mindedly losing myself in comics and then looking up, like, 2 or 3 years later and going, huh? Why no books? Basically, I'm not gonna really allow comic reading time into book reading time. comic reading time can eat into gaming time because there's still plenty of that time to go around. You may have already seen I put out a video the other day talking about Ultimate Spider-Man, the 2024 run. That's just come out. The first 8 issues are on Marvel Unlimited, and Ultimate Invasion and Ultimate Universe. That kind of like led into the entire reboot of this Ultimate Universe thing. I'm not going to regurgitate everything I talked about in that video, but a very brief overview for those of you who don't know. The Ultimate Universe is like an offshoot of the main universe, where you kind of like get to see events from day one. At least the original Ultimate Universe was this way. If you didn't want to have to deal with multiple decades of baggage despite soft reboots when it comes to like Amazing Spider-Man, you could just read Ultimate Spider-Man instead, which kind of retells the main story, but does so with the kind of the foreknowledge of knowing all of the plot points they want to get to, and therefore being able to weave them together in a little bit more of a dynamic way. I really recommend the original Ultimate Spider-Man series. I also really recommend the new Ultimate Spider-Man series, although that one's a little bit more of a what-if situation than the original Ultimate Spider-Man was. But yeah, as far as other comics I want to read, I did mention this again in a video. I want to read every line of the 2024 Ultimate Universe comics, but alongside those, because then I'll be up to date and I can stay up to date as they come out monthly, I do want to get back on a horse with my Amazing Spider-Man read-through. We are so close to Spider Island, which is the main thing I was interested in from the get-go. I want to see the Spider-Verse stuff, and I want to get back to Miguel O'Hara with Spider-Man 2099 when they rebooted that. But also I'm feeling some 4. I'd like to get in some 4 comics, I just never have. 4, I know I can't say it properly. I don't know how to do THs at this point, I don't even care. But I remember struggling with that in the past as well. And I guess we could do Fantastic Four as well, in terms of like, if I ever feel like going back to the 60s and reading some really old comics, I wouldn't mind doing that through the vein of reading the Fantastic Four comics. And X-Men as well, gotta read some X-Men, but yeah, basically it's opened up this whole vein of comics, and rather unhelpfully as well, it has gotten me thinking about the DC comics as well, and that's on a separate subscription, so I'm going to hold myself back from that one, although I have had both subscriptions together once before. When I had a yearly for Marvel Unlimited, I went with the monthly for DC Universe. Unfortunately, Marvel Unlimited didn't keep any of my old reading progress, so I run the risk of thinking that I am reading something I haven't read before, getting halfway through it, and then starting to remember what happens. Due to this, I decided to kind of like go back through my memories and create a little... I mean, I was always going to do like a reading activity spreadsheet. I've got one for DC Comics already, but going back through and doing that from memory was quite difficult. But yeah, I now have a little thing of like, oh, I read this comic line, I read this comic line. I did actually manage to figure out where I stopped reading both Amazing Spider-Man and Daredevil Volume 2. I think I might have finished reading Daredevil Volume 2 right towards the end of it. I don't know if the Shadowland stuff ended that series or what. But despite loving Daredevil Volume 2, some of the best comics I've ever read, it's astonishing how good that comic line is for how long it goes on for. I really didn't love whatever they were doing with the Shadowland thing. Shadowland is just kind of a cursed name in general if you want to make some kind of narrative. Turns out, don't name your thing Shadowland or Shadowlands. Anyway, finally, in terms of more traditional reading, I suppose, I am continuing to rip through Howling Dark by Christopher Ruocchio. I've realised people pronounce his name Ruocchio. I've been saying Ruocchio. But that book continues to be the absolute focal point of all of my reading endeavours, sans comics, apparently. And I love it so very much. A thing just happened, and a lot of things happen in that book, so you don't even know what I'm referring to. But a thing just happened, and I have a lot of emotions about it. I'll tell you all about it in the spoiler review when that's done, I'm sure. Oh, one last thing. You may have noticed I've been posting daily shorts of me opening Pokemon Trading Card Pocket packs of cards. I've been having a lot of fun doing that. I've been needing to revitalize the shorts thing for a while because shorts is crazy good for discoverability in a way that videos just aren't. But I definitely got burned out on clipping shorts out of my own videos because I had to watch a lot of my own videos in order to do that. And yes, here is a silly thing that happened towards the end of my recording. Well, I guess after the end of my recording. I had to turn it back on for this. Anyway, yeah, if you didn't know, I've got those shorts of me just opening packs. Sometimes they'll be uneventful because I want it to be a surprise when something good happens. But it's literally just me recording my iPad from my phone. Like, not even the screen of my iPad, because that would require a little bit more work, but also I like being able to do hand gestures and stuff. Anyway, this is going to be the last weekly waypoint from me before Christmas, so if you do celebrate, I hope you have a wonderful time, and if not, I hope you have a wonderful week all the same. Catch you in whatever I make next.